evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking the time from your day to join us tonight for a night to speak up and speak out on this important topic that has been overlooked for a long time: sexual and domestic assaults on campus. My name is Mario Cortez. My pronouns are he, him, and his.
My name is Ebony Brito, and my pronouns is he, her, hers. And we are the graduate students in the Master of Social Work program here at CSUDH.
So before we get started, I want to introduce someone, Mayra Romo. She's a victims advocate here at California State University, Dominguez Hills. She has to leave because of a workshop she's hosting, so she wants to share some information for you.
Hello everybody, my name is Myra. I'm actually new. I've been here for about 6 months. My official title is Sexual Assault Victim Advocate, and my role is to support students, staff, and faculty who may have impacted by sexual assault, dating and domestic violence, stalking, and sexual harassment. I am a confidential resource. That means that I don't report to Title IX, I don't report to law enforcement. Everything that's shared with me is confidential. And people that seek my services doesn't have to be a recent assault. I support students that have dealt with child abuse and maybe want to explore options that they might have, whether it be for healing or reporting. A little bit about my background. I have been certified in sexual assault, counseling, and domestic violence. I've been an advocate for about 11 years, including 3 years at a local rape crisis center in Santa Barbara and 8 years in higher ed. So I've done this work for a long time, and I'm really happy to be on this campus and happy to see that different departments are valuing out and bringing this awareness. And I do have to apologize that I have to go. I'm actually doing a program called My Little Black Dress Campaign. I don't know if any of you have heard about it. It's a new campaign we started this year, but it's a campaign meant to bring awareness around victim blaming and creating an environment that supports survivors and holds perpetrators accountable, which is something that we're striving for. And what this is we have a workshop where people get trained on these issues and how to educate others, really for training. And then you receive either a t-shirt that says their little black dress is not niñas, or a dress that says my little black dress is not niñas. And so everybody who attended the training will be wearing that tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. And ask them questions and let me know if they know how to respond. Because I want to make sure that they respond appropriately and they're able to educate people that see this campaign and ask those questions. There's information on how to contact me on the booklet. There's also little cards that I left up in the back here. Ways that you can speak with me is you can email me and set up an appointment, or I also have a link where you can schedule an appointment with me in real time and see my schedule and connect that with your schedule. So if you want to talk about something that happened here, if you have any questions, if there's someone you would like to know more about how to support them, I'm more than happy to help. And if there's no availability, when you can connect with me, email me and I'll make some room to see you. So thank you again. I'm sorry it can't be this event. I hope it goes amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And her information is on page 29 of the booklet, so we did put it in there.
We have a very important announcement. The restrooms. Where's the restrooms, Mario?
All right, so the restrooms, they're located right outside next to the vending machines. And guess what, everyone?
What?
You don't need a code and you don't need keys to use our restrooms.
Mario, shade. Shade. So we're going to talk about material that's considered sensitive, and if at any moment you feel that this might trigger a response, feel free to step outside. Why are we doing this?
Well, our class, Social Justice, Practice and Social Work, decided to throw away all of our papers, all the presentations in the syllabus, throw it just right out the window, and work on something more meaningful. We created this event as a project to raise awareness of college sexual assault and intimate partner violence, also known as domestic violence. These issues happen every day in our campus, and we're not talking about it. Well, we're going to talk about it tonight, and we're going to get loud about it. We also want to thank Professor Vu for allowing us to go beyond a classroom setting and putting action behind social justice. Thank you, Professor Vu. Without you, this would not be possible.
Also, we want to give you guys a reminder to take a look at your booklet. It has a lot of information in there, and it's a great overview of today's topic. As well, we really worked hard on it, so if you guys could take a look at it, don't throw it away, please. And with that said, we are taught in our program the importance of creating a safe space. So that's exactly what we're doing here tonight. Any personal stories shared in today's room will stay here. So be mindful of the words you use, as they might be a trigger for victims in the room. We want everyone to feel safe and respected.
The material we will present today are real statistics and real incidents that have happened to someone in this room. Therefore, if you feel like you might need to talk to someone, we have 4 compassionate listeners that can support you if you get triggered by anything that is presented tonight. We have Carlos, Wendy, Adriana, and Stephanie. Can you please raise your hand? Thank you. In case you didn't notice, today is Denim Day. Ebony, can you explain what Denim Day is?
So Peace Over Violence is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to the elimination of sexual and domestic violence. And for the last 18 years, Peace Over Violence has held an annual Denim Day on a Wednesday in April in remembrance of a court decision where rape conviction was overturned because justices felt that the victim's choice of clothing implied consent. Since that day, wearing jeans on Denim Day has become a symbol of protest against destructive attitudes towards sexual assault. Peace Over Violence is declaring April 25th, 2018 as Denim Day in an effort to draw the attention to the fact that rape and sexual assault is still a serious issue in our society. Many in our society remain disturbingly uninformed about issues of assault and forcible rape.
So if you look at your booklet on page 7, we have definitions, and I'm just gonna read 2 of them right now. So an ally is an individual who consciously strives towards promoting justice and ending marginalization. And consent. Consent is when someone agrees, gives permission, or says yes to sexual activity with other persons. Consent is always freely given, and all people in a sexual situation must feel like they are able to say yes or no, or to stop the sexual activity at any point.
We also have some statistics on page 9 and 10. You guys can take a look at those as well. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lives. 27% of college women have experienced some form of unwanted sexual contact.
Every 98 seconds, someone in the US is sexually assaulted. Please join me in a moment of silence to be mindful of this statistic. Thank you.
Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crimes.
Women between the ages of 18 to 24 are most commonly abused by an intimate partner.
Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries.
On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide.
Victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behavior.
1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime.
On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States.
19% of domestic violence involves a weapon.
The presence of a gun in domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%.
Sexual assault disproportionately affects college women and impedes their ability to participate fully in college life.
As of 1998, an estimated 17.7 million American women had been victims of attempted or completed rape.
11.2% of all students experience rape or sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation.
Younger people are at the highest risk for being victims of sexual violence.
Nearly 2/3 of college students experience sexual harassment.
Every 98 seconds, someone in America is sexually assaulted.
More than 90% of sexual assault victims on college campuses do not report the assault.
There is never an invitation or excuse to rape.
We will now move on to our panel discussion. Ann Ford will be the moderator and will introduce our speakers.
Okay, I had some problem earlier. How is this? Sound okay? Hello, my name is Ann Foy. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Okay, gotta get my glasses. So, recent events, especially the Me Too movement, are allowing people to come forward and share what they've experienced and perhaps kept buried for years. As a social justice class, we felt hopeful and that celebrating Denim Day with you, and in fact acknowledging that April is Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Awareness Month, will allow us to address, identify, and challenge something that has deep roots and subtle influence in our society. Our hope is that we can make changes and that together all of us can stop domestic violence and sexual assault. Sexual assault and domestic violence happens to all ages, abilities, genders, and sexual orientations. The experience can leave survivors feeling less human than they felt before. The beginning of these forms of violence can often be very subtle: controlling behavior, humiliation, name-calling, isolating the victim, or making them feel confused and needing to second-guess themselves. Ongoing abuse causes the survivor to take on behaviors to appease the victimizer, but it's never enough because the victimizer always changes the rules. And the survivor is not the only victim. Children from homes where domestic violence occurs are physically abused or seriously neglected at a rate 1,500 times the rate of the national average. So today we have a distinguished panel whom I will introduce in a moment. Tonight, as a group, we have the opportunity to think about the actions and conversations that can and should come together to animate what we can do to contribute to the eradication of sexual assault and domestic violence. To my left, first, Wendy Blanco. Wendy is a licensed clinical social worker with over 16 years of experience working in the field of trauma. Wendy is the Director of Trauma Services at the East Los Angeles Women's Center. Wendy has been involved in different realms of social work, including individual, group, and community-based work in the fields of mental health, trauma, HIV/AIDS, and training students entering the field of clinical social work. Wendy has been involved in community organizing efforts, partnering with organizations such as Pasadena Mental Health Advisory Committee, San Gabriel Valley National Association of Mental Illness, Adelante Mujer Latina, and local efforts in the Whittier area to raise awareness about social issues and to empower the community to find their voice. Wendy has been asked to speak on issues such as sexual harassment, sexual assault, domestic violence, culturally responsive interventions, and trauma-informed care. To Wendy's left is Officer Munoz. Officer Munoz is a domestic abuse responding officer, a DART officer. He has a BA in criminal justice and has been an officer for 6 years with the Los Angeles Police Department. DART officers focus exclusively on helping the police officers of the unit that respond to a call, including domestic violence. He provides assistance by educating the survivor or reporter about an emergency protection order, helping the person get one, and referring the victim survivor to an advocate who can help access services after the initial emergency intervention ends. To his left is Detective Benny Williams of the California State University Dominguez Hills Police Department. Detective Williams has 19 years of law enforcement experience. He received his basic training with the Los Angeles Police Department before working for the Cal State Dominguez Hills Police Department. Detective Williams has held numerous field and investigative positions within the Cal State U Police Department. He's worked patrol, gangs, burglary, and auto theft details. He has also held such positions as element member of the Southern California Critical Response Unit, CRU. And Detective Williams has worked as field training officer and a department operations sergeant. Detective Sergeant Williams has investigated gangs, hate crimes, sexual assault, crimes against persons and crimes against property, domestic or family violence, identity theft, internet crimes, child predators, and fraud investigations as a detective. Detective Williams also has been assigned to specialized investigative details such as internal affairs, professional standards, warrant services, FBI Federal Joint Task Force Unit. He currently holds the rank of sergeant in charge of internal affairs, professional standards, and was the emergency operations liaison officer for the police department. Detective Sergeant Williams is a graduate of the LAPD Detective and Homicide Schools. And he is fluent in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Okay. To his left is Ms. Kanisha Jackson. She is a PR specialist at Underground PR and CEO of Majestic Hearts. She's an alum. We're excited to say she graduated from CSUDH in 2009 with a bachelor's in mass communications. Since graduating, she's worked for several PR companies and honed skills in entertainment and corporate PR. In 2013, she started her own PR company, Underground PR, where she represents small businesses, upcoming entertainers, and nonprofit organizations. Its niche is women empowerment. In October 2017, the 33-year-old founded Majestic Hearts, which is a nonprofit organization for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. Its tagline is, "Converting victims into survivors." The organization seeks to be a refuge in the fight against domestic violence and sexual assault through workshops, shelter, mentoring, education, and counseling. This year, the organization is on a mission to raise $50,000 for its first 2 programs, shelter and counseling. This year, the organization, Ms. Jackson is a survivor of domestic violence, which led to the birth of Majestic Hearts. Her experience has created a passion to help others become survivors. The organization is geared towards men, women, and children. And to her left is Megan Togle Adams. Megan is the director of Cal State Dominguez Women's Resource Center. She graduated from Cal State University Long Beach with a double major in Women's Studies and Spanish. She completed her master's in American Culture Studies with an emphasis on Women's Studies from Bowling Green University. She does a great job here on campus. Megas likes the college environment and enjoys being around students who want to make a difference on campus as well as in their community. So first, we'll start with Wendy. And if you'd like.
Okay. Hello. It's working. Hi, everyone. Thank you, first off, for having me here and for coming to this event, which is so important. I wish this could be an annual thing, so the students don't forget about Cal State Dominguez Hills once you guys graduate in a couple of weeks. But I think this is such an important event. As you were mentioning some of my experience, I've been in the field for 16 years, working in different capacities, really focused on trauma and women and violence against women. So that's really my focus. One of the things that I think was really prominent for me in my career is that I was working in trauma, and the reason why I got into the field is because I myself grew up in a home where there was domestic violence, both emotionally, physically, and everything else that comes with that. And so it wasn't until I got my training at East LA Women's Center that I realized that how impactful that experience had been for me, and the way that shaped me as an adult, and the way that sort of messes you up in your ability to really foster healthy relationships, right? And I think that it was really important. It was an awareness for me to realize that it's important, one, to recognize that the environment that I was living in was not okay. And even if that environment never changed, what could I do to make that change for me in such a way that was empowering, and also talking about it in prevention and doing the education piece that was really important in my community. And when I say, my best up ability to sustain a healthy relationship is not to say that everyone's experience is the same, but it does change who you are and it shapes you in some ways. So it's really important to acknowledge trauma as an experience, and then complex trauma. So for me, it was growing up in a family where there was domestic violence, and then having trauma on top of that in my own adulthood. So coming to terms with all of that, and seeing myself in a lot of the clients that come in the office, and really just being with them and allowing them to have that safe space to really talk about these things was really important. But I started off my career really working on trauma, working with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And then after a while, I sort of went into the realm of working with survivors or people living with HIV and AIDS. One of the things that I realized really quickly was that there is trauma everywhere. So there is large percentages of people living with HIV that have had their own trauma history that may put them at risk for STIs and other things for other reasons that are too complex to really talk about in such a short time. But I realized that trauma was everywhere and trauma needed to be addressed. So as a therapist, understanding that people are not just symptoms, and people are not just suffering with problems, but really understanding where is the root of all of that and where's the cause. And most of the time there's trauma involved in some level of trauma history. So I worked in HIV for 8 years, and then most recently coming back to the world of trauma, working with, again, survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And one of the things that has been really powerful is to seeing organizations that have really cultivated an environment where there's more wraparound services. So it's really important to understand that, yes, counseling is good and therapy is good, but that doesn't work for everyone. And depending on your culture and your experience, you may not think therapy is an option. So it's really important for agencies to be trauma informed and to really provide options for people to access services. So whether it be having different levels of counselors, paraprofessionals, professionals, depending on what people feel comfortable with. The East Los Angeles Women's Center, one of the things we pride ourselves in is creating a program. We have the largest promotora program that has 7 different collectives all over LA County. And what they do is they really train the community leaders. It started off in Boyle Heights. And what they did is they trained the community leaders to then be educators in their own community, right? Providing talks about healthy communication, healthy relationships, domestic violence, sexual assault. And so it really has been a trial and error in all of our programs that we provide. So not just the counseling piece, but recognizing that domestic violence is one of the leading causes of women being homeless in LA County or all over the world. So it's really important for us to address the housing need. And then when we look at the housing need, we needed to address employment and training, financial literacy and financial empowerment for women and men. And so the work has really converted into more of a wraparound service. And it has really grown in the way that we're more aware of the need. And so I don't know what much more you want me to say about the work that I do, but in these questions that we'll have later on, we'll get into some of the specific services and what can you do as an ally, as we already learned in that book, which I think is wonderful, having these definitions and everyone being an ally for survivors of trauma, because that's really what trauma informed is really acting as if everyone in the room has some level of trauma. So if you turn on the TV, even watching the news chronically, there's like some level of trauma that you're experiencing by watching so much horrible, so many horrible events happening in the world. And so, so treating everyone as if they come with some level of trauma and not asking what happened to you, but what's wrong with you, asking what happened, to looking at trauma histories.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Officer Munoz with Los Angeles Police Department, currently assigned Rampart Division. We cover the areas of Westlake, Silver Lake, Echo Park. My main assignment right now, I've been assigned to the DART team. It's a domestic abuse response team. Us, along with a civilian advocate, we respond to the initial radio calls of domestic violence as they happen. We respond together, we support the victim and the children. We also, the advocate provides a lot of services, housing, cell phones to these victims and children. And we also provide, on the law enforcement side, we provide the emergency protective order, contacting whatever entity we need to in regards to the children. And I'm looking forward to the questions you guys are going to ask later. I'll get into specifics as well, how we deal with the radio calls and how we work alongside with the advocate to help these victims of domestic violence.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Detective Benny Williams. I work here at Dominguez, but I was also working in East LA for Cal State Dominguez Hills in the East LA region. I worked alongside several other officers we have here in Long Beach. My job solely is to investigate crimes. I work the Special Response Team for Sexual Assaults. We cover Cal State Dominguez, we cover the StubHub Center, and 1 mile radius around the campus. Excuse me if I speak quickly, I'm a native New Yorker, and our problem is we speak too fast. But I have a tendency to listen to everything everybody has to say. I'm looking forward to the Q&A we're going to have later on, and any question you have, definitely ask me. The reason why I'm here is because I work for you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenesha L. Jackson. I am the founder and CEO of Majestic Hearts. As Ann mentioned, it's a nonprofit for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I am a survivor. I fell under the category or the statistic of 18 to 24-year-olds in college who have been victimized. And so before coming back home, which is here in California, I'm a Los Angeles native, I went to school in Greensboro, North Carolina. I went to an all-girls school, and I met this gentleman whom I thought was to die for, literally. But he turned out to be very abusive. It started emotional abuse, verbal abuse, the physical abuse was the last thing. And the last straw for me was when he pulled a gun out on me. So that's another statistic I fall under. And so I went the next day after the incident and pulled out a restraining order on him. I finished out the semester, which was about 2 months, and it was the longest 2 months of my life. During that time, I had lost my keys to my dorm room, so I was even more paranoid. I changed my appearance just to try to keep him from recognizing me while I was out and about. However, there is a silver lining to that. Again, I am a survivor. That situation could have gone totally left. I could not be here with you all right now today. So graciously, God was on my side, and I was able to escape that terrible, tumultuous relationship. So it did allow me to birth Majestic Hearts, which brings me here today. Again, our tagline is converting victims into survivors. And our mission is to be a refuge in the fight against domestic violence and sexual assault. So thank you for having me here. And I also want to shout out one of my therapists who's here in the house today, Ms. Veronica Higgins. She's she's one of our therapists for Majestic Heart. So I'm happy to see you here. And I will pass the mic. Thank you all.
So hi everyone, I'm Megan Togley-Adams, Director of the Women's Resource Center. So I have been here since August, so about 8 months, I think. So before that, I worked at University of Maryland, Baltimore County for 4 years as Assistant Director of the Women's Resource Center there. My work in anti-violence advocacy actually goes back to when I was an undergrad at Long Beach. As part of the feminist organization there, I spent a lot of time at the Women's Resource Center, organized Take Back the Night and Clothesline Project, and as I became more interested in these issues, I was a McNair scholar, and my research project was on how homophobia and heterosexism impacts victims' experiences with relationship violence and same-sex relationships. And when I went to grad school, continued along these lines of advocacy and activism. So it's work that I've been doing for a while, and especially with a lot of focus on intersectionality and the way different people experience relationship violence, sexual assault, the trauma itself, as well as the healing process, the way it looks very differently from individual to individual, but especially thinking about our various social identities. So thinking about even my own experiences. I am a survivor as well of multiple sexual assaults, and one of them was the perpetrator was a woman, and it involved a lot of coercion and biphobia. And so it was something that when I talk about that, which is not very often, it's something that's very difficult to explain to people because of the way we've conceptualized violence as always being something that a man perpetrates against a woman. And in terms of just numbers and statistics, predominantly that is what it is. And we can acknowledge that fact at the same time as we acknowledge that it absolutely does happen in same-gender relationships. It absolutely does happen with women as the perpetrators, and that we need to find a way to create space for those conversations at the same time, and it doesn't minimize any experience. And so it's something that I think in terms of talking about things like masculinity, we can't conceptualize how men can be victims if we're always constructing them as men always want sex. If men always want sex, if that's always their goal, then how can they have ever not wanted it? And you'll see the way that plays out with even a sex scandal between a 13-year-old boy and his 30-year-old English teacher. It's not a sex scandal, it's rape and it's sexual assault, but we can't talk about that. Or women as always wanting to being women as always soft and always the victims and always the ones who are supposed to say no while men are pushing for yes. Then how can we conceptualize a woman as aggressors? We don't create, in my opinion, enough space for the whole complexities of people, and oftentimes the only time that, for example, that men are brought up as victims is when we're talking about rape culture and toxic masculinity and men's violence against women. When it's a conversation about that, so there's always somebody who wants to say, well, men are raped too. Yes, and also you can just say men are raped. It doesn't always have to be that like that add-on of like, oh, don't forget about the men. Okay, but they're not a footnote. They deserve an entire conversation that's about them and their unique experiences, just as we should be able to have conversations that are about women and their unique experiences as well. So, an example, when I was working at UMBC, we would often get those. We would have a space like Take Back the Night. We would have workshops on supporting survivors on different things, and there was always that person who said, well, men get raped too. So, and we thought, okay, you're kind of, I feel like you're derailing right now, but that is an important point. So we designed an entire program that was all about men as victims, that talked about their unique challenges, circumstances, where are resources where they can seek help, and I think one person came. And so it was one of those things where I'm thinking like it needs its own attention, just like we need to talk about sexual violence against people who are undocumented. We can't just say, well, go to the police, go to the hospital, or people who are trans, go to the hospital in a place where you might be mistreated, go to a place where the resources might not speak English. We need to have all these conversations, and it needs to be more than just a footnote. It needs to be something that really takes into consideration all of their needs and all of their contributions.
Okay, Mario, is this the traveling microphone?
But those work too.
Yeah. Okay, do you want to take this for? So what we'd like to do now is open up questions from the audience. And we'll have Ebony run around and pass the microphone. Any first volunteers?
So my question is for Officer, I forgot your name, but the officer that works with the DART system. My question is, when working with families in domestic violence, and I heard you say that you guys support the children?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering, do you guys place them in a home or facility where they can still be with their mom? Like, do you keep the family unit together, or are they separated and put into temporary shelters?
Turn it on, it's from the top.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So to answer the question, I did also want to mention I do have my advocate that comes along with me to the radio calls, Wendy Garcia, to my right. Say hi. She comes along with me to our radio calls. My main role is to make sure that she's safe at these radio calls, but she will take care of the placing the victims and the children. From my understanding is we try to keep them together. We try to keep the families together. The only time I've heard that somebody can't come with the victim is when pets are involved. That's the only one that I know. But for the most part, yes, children, we do try to keep the family together.
Any other questions?
My question is also for you, officer, just since you're in the limelight right now. I'm curious about the DART program. Is this only for certain domestic violence calls? Like, how is the response routed to DART versus, like, with your advocate versus just all domestic violence calls? Because I know, like, in this area, people have made calls and there's not always an advocate, so I'm just curious about DART, I guess.
Well, just in general, we'll listen up to the radio. We work weekends. We work usually from 3 to 1 in the morning. And any type of, we listen up when the radio call comes out of a man-woman dispute. It doesn't say domestic violence, but we take the initiative to say, you know what, it could be domestic violence. You know, we wait for the initial officers to go, make sure everything's okay. Then I go and take the advocate and we investigate to make sure, you know, to see if there is domestic violence or not. And if there isn't, we let the officers take care of it. And if there is, we go ahead and give them any services that they need.
Can I add to that too? The other thing is that many different agencies, depending on the service area, they have contracts with DART teams. So, for example, Peace Over Violence will have 6 different DART stations, LAPD stations. East LA Women's Center will also respond, or our advocates are sort of attached to the police departments. And so when the call comes out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times the call will come out from the doctors, from the hospital themselves, or sometimes the calls come directly to the detectives, and the detectives will then call the advocates to go out in teams. So not only are there the domestic abuse response teams, but also the SART teams, so sexual abuse response team, and that's a little bit separate. And they respond to the SART centers for the rape kits.
Any other questions? Okay.
Hi, how you guys doing today? I actually had a question. First I wanted to thank you at the end, turquoise sweater, yes, for mentioning about men, because I do feel that it is something that's not talked about and something that is overlooked. And I do think that it is important to change the way we communicate about it, not just like an add-on, kind of what you mentioned. But I wanted to ask you all, how is it in your experience when you guys just are interacting with people in regards to certain populations like men who go, not really talked about or sometimes even unnoticed? So how is that in your experience, and like how do you deal with those type of situations? Is the question clear?
Yes. Do you want this one? Yeah, I'll just move this one.
Okay, so I will say it's creating, without defining someone else's experience for them, and I think this goes for everyone, that someone often will come to me and say, well, I'm not a victim or a survivor, I wasn't sexually assaulted, but this happened, and they will describe sexual assault to a T. And that happens a lot because either they don't know that it actually qualifies, or they don't want to see themselves as a victim, or they don't want other people to see them this way. And I think especially we'll see this with men a lot of times, because a lot of times when they're assaulted, it happens when they're younger. And I've seen this, I even see this in the media, where kind of prominent male like actors or singers in pop culture will go on like a late night talk show, and it's like, oh, tell us about your first time. And it's like, oh yeah, I was 10, 12, and it was with the babysitter who was 17, or it was with my mom's friend who was 35, and it's told as like a funny anecdote. And people will kind of, it's this very like bro-y kind of high five culture. And so, I think Chris Brown, he was one that he disclosed that. I think Lil Wayne, a few other like comedians, actors, and it's happening a lot. And it's only maybe like later, like a few people on the blogosphere will say like, that's not okay. And so I think we need to create this space where it's okay for men to say, this thing happened and it wasn't comfortable. So that when they do share that story, the reaction isn't like high five, wow, glad you lost your virginity early. It's without saying you were raped, saying like, wow, that sounds really scary. Have you ever talked to anybody else about this? Or I'm sorry that happened to you. Even just changing the way we respond to conversations when people disclose like that. And same thing when I've talked to male survivors, it's, well, I really didn't want to. I felt like she expected me to, and kind of push, and it wasn't okay, but it's not a big deal. As people say, like, it is a big deal, and it's okay if you're not ready to define your experience. It's okay if you're not ready to take these steps. But I want to at least create a space for you to not feel like less of a man because you weren't okay with this thing that happened to you, and that we shouldn't tie up masculinity with sexual prowess, with having lots of partners, having lots of sex. It's something that's not something that they genuinely want, because I don't think like I said, we're not creating space for men to even conceive of anything that happens to them as something less than something deserving of kind of a high five.
Thank you.
One more question for the detective for this university. where are we at with sexual violence on our campus? Because what I'm concerned about is I can understand new incoming students to this institution, but every semester students have to take the Not Anymore video before they can even register into their classes. Now I find that program very informative, but is the violence on campus decreasing or is it increasing? Because it just seems to be ongoing. I mean, is this just a new thing we're implementing for the campus altogether for every semester, or are we,
Well, let me address the issue of crime. Well, sexual assault, rapes, domestic violence, tremendously underreported. So the numbers, even if the numbers are low, in my opinion, the numbers are relatively high. People are very embarrassed, they don't want to come forward, they're scared. So to answer that question, numbers, never pay attention to the numbers, more the culture. So if it's socially unacceptable, like today we're all here, we know it's socially unacceptable to do certain things. So rape, domestic violence, sexual assault, the bottom line is it's not acceptable. The law enforcement agency, we try to take a proactive stand and address certain classes whenever we get an opportunity. We're invited here today, so I'm very happy. But no, crime to me is never exactly what's perpetrated on the news. It's the number always have to be a little skewed to answer that. So I don't know if that really gives you direction. Now at this campus, it's a very, very low number. Is that an accurate number? Quite honestly, I couldn't tell you. We have a housing tract. The housing tract that we have here, students live in housing, 600 some odd students. They want to expand that, double the size. Something's obviously going on, but the only thing we can do is help individuals as they tell us what's going on. So if you are a friend, or a neighbor, a sister, a cousin, you can call on behalf of the victim and say, hey, listen, we think there's some items, some things going on. You don't have to give the name. There's anonymous tip lines that we have also. So we'll work off of that, and we can only convey certain experiences to help that individual. Does that kind of answer the question? And one tidbit to add, these things are all about power and control. That's all that it is. It's power and control. Yes, sex is the underlying issue, but it's power and control. How can you seize power of somebody and take control of that individual? And those are the heinous acts we're discussing today.
I wanted to add on to the question that you asked earlier about creating safe spaces for men. I think one of the things that our agency has done is we've created spaces for men's healing circles. And so we've partnered with the National Compadres Network, which is, they talk a lot about toxic masculinity and how to create spaces so that men can talk about these things, right? But I think that it's still a lot of work to do around that, because even when I was working at Peace Over Violence a few years ago, and we created a sexual assault support group for men, we had to change the name of the group to get more attendance from men. So we ended up changing the name, we called it MENS, which was an acronym for men exposed to non-consensual experiences or something like that. So that actually brought more men in. And I think, in my opinion, sometimes we try to create, as therapists, we try to create these wonderful interventions. And what we missed the mark by asking the community what it is that they need, because culturally, and not to perpetuate stereotypes, but maybe having a space where people engage, maybe that's not the best place to start these conversations. It really needs to be everywhere, not in just isolated place at Peace Over Violence where people are talking about these issues, but creating sort of what you were talking about, and creating more awareness even in pop culture, or more awareness in the type of movies we watch and TV. So I think it needs to go across and beyond what we're doing, but really start with social media and all these other ways that we communicate, and really start there to start educating sort of like in general.
Okay, so I have a question. It's interesting that you guys have such a varied background and perspective. I really think it's a rich experience for us. So thinking about what you guys have talked about, maybe somebody admitting that something has gone on, they're starting their healing process. but there's certainly a difference between healing and justice. So I'm wondering, what are your perspectives of a person who may choose not to go forward with the criminal justice system, etc.? And since you have such a wide background here, maybe a little bit of comment from the law end and a little bit of comment from the healing end.
So I think our roles are all different, and so we may answer this differently. For advocates, I think our major goal is to make sure that the person feels safe and that they feel heard. So by sharing your story, you're healing through storytelling. So that's one of the things we know about being able to share your narrative. So we just provide the space for people to heal. We, as advocates, are being trauma-informed is giving everyone all their options and having them choose what is best for them. You know, making a report with law enforcement may not be the safest thing for them, and they will determine that, and maybe later on they'll change their mind. And so our job is really just to inform them of what their options are. And for me, I like to go beyond and let them know these are your options, and if you chose that option, this is what might happen. I can't guarantee that will happen, but I want them to really be informed so that they make an informed decision. And so as an advocate, that is my role, and that's what we do.
Sometimes for us, when we go to these radio calls, the uniform itself sometimes is intimidating to some victims. They don't feel comfortable sharing what just happened or what's going on to us. So the good thing is that I have the advocate with me, and we'll switch roles. We'll say, hey, talk to this victim, ask her what's going on, or hey, I think this is going on. Can you try to get her to tell you what really had her and what really happened? And sometimes they will. They'll open up to them, and then that kind of brings me in. And like you mentioned, we can give them the options. These are your options. This is what will happen with either option you choose. And I think it really does help law enforcement when we have that civilian advocate, because it just helps kind of bridge that gap between the victim and law enforcement.
Picking up from the officer left off, for me, from the investigation end, our officers here on campus, we have a SART, Special Response Team, that goes to the local hospitals. So we deal with Harvey, UCLA. We also have a little company of Mary and Santa Monica. So for me, once I get the case, it's more, I'm doing a follow-up. I go after the fact. So I'm asking certain questions, but the best way to ask questions for me would be being very sympathetic, but also being empathetic. It's not just about getting the case and filing the case and that's it. For me, it's getting the case, telling the survivor that I'm here for them, which I am, and what I can do. I never make promises because we never know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I give them a direction of what avenues we have and what's available. So that's the best thing I can do for the survivor. Survivors are very timid, and sometimes you have to take time. You have to take time, listen to what somebody's saying, and really hear what they're saying. And that's the best way to help them have closure. Whether the suspect or the perpetrator goes to prison or not, that's the ultimate concern for the judge and the jury. For law enforcement, it's closure for that individual, because that individual is the person that you're going to see day in and day out, who's going to have that memory of whether law enforcement, whether it's in uniform or in plain clothes, what they truly did for them. They really respect them enough to treat them like a person. We're discussing whether it's male or female, like we said earlier, or a woman in general. Don't promise something you can't do, and chariot, excuse my language, be the warrior that person needs for that instance.
So, Majestic Hearts looks to, as mentioned, our first two programs are counseling, therapy and shelter. Being that, as Wendy mentioned, telling your story is very healing. Time heals wounds, as the old adage goes. So sharing with people, letting them know, hey, I too have been where you are. It helps to make you more relatable, helping people to share their story with others as well as getting help from counselors or therapists as well can help the individual heal. One of our missions is to open up a shelter facility. Being that we are a new nonprofit, we don't have that ability yet, but within the next couple of years, we do plan on opening a shelter so that we can house families, men, women, and children to be able to escape their abusers, go into transitional housing, assist with financial literacy, which is something else that Wendy mentioned, and just assist them with helping them get back on their feet and being independent. So I think shelter, counseling, speaking, helping others will help the healing process.
So I'll say in terms of the relationship between government and justice, so similarly as other advocates, I'm here to support the survivor in whatever it is that they need, and they are the best person to determine what they need. I'm just here to offer guidance, support, information, resources. So when students come to talk to me, whether it's connecting them to Myra Romo, who you all met earlier, if they just, I can talk about if they want to file a complaint through Title IX, what does that process look like? I can accompany them. If anyone is going through the Title IX process, you're allowed to have an advocate with you. It could be Myra, it could be a lawyer, it could be your mom, it could be anyone. So if that helps with them. If it's about filing a police report, if it's about just getting connected to therapy, counseling, whatever that looks like, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's just someone to listen, and it can change from day to day. So for me, I think prioritizing healing allows space for justice. I have a hard time imagining justice without healing. And so I think also when I think about justice is, again, coming with an intersectional lens and not trying to push one correct response, because I think about, for example, right now when, not to paint with a broad brush, but thinking about the issues of race and police brutality, that when I am talking to young Black and brown women, that a lot of times they don't feel safe going to the police. And for me, it's very important to validate those concerns and not say, you should really report this. That's not for me to decide. And I think also there are conversations that I've heard from people about if the perpetrator is, for example, a Black man, this sort of, whether it's intra-community pressure or just something that is in their own mind of feeling like, do I want to be part of something that contributes to this over-criminalization of Black men and over-incarceration and all of these sorts of things. And again, those are really complicated conversations that it's not for me to say, here's the answer, call the police, file a report, this is what's going to happen. It's for me to say, and to be there and listen, support, and provide as much space as they can to work through that at their own pace and not to rush them. And so I think, again, with making sure that the responsibility isn't put on them to feel like they have to file a report or else, because that's another, I hear that rhetoric a lot, especially with Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein or the doctor with the gymnast at University of Michigan, these sort of serial rapists. And we know that this happens on college campuses too, that a lot of times it's serial rapists and perpetrators, that sometimes rather than us focusing on what allowed this perpetrator to think that this was okay to get away with this so many times in a way that puts the responsibility on the perpetrator, saying, well, if that first victim had gone to the police, none of these others would have happened, and so therefore it's the victim's fault for these subsequent acts of violence. And really making sure that victims aren't taking on that responsibility, because their focus should be on their healing and not worrying about future potential victims. I want them to have the space that they need, whatever that might look like.
Any other questions?
How often do you find that the perpetrator is also a victim themselves?
The question is, how often do you find that the perpetrator is also a victim themselves?
That's a very good question. So at our agency, we don't actually have services for the perpetrators because, well, we haven't, and many of the agencies don't really provide services both for victims and survivors. So one of the things that we've changed recently is we started a healing circle for the partners of our clients. The reason why is because, again, culturally we know that there's a lot of entities that might come into play in someone's life after a domestic violence incident. For example, DCFS might get involved and request that, that the survivor leave the home. And so what we know from what we've, heard from our clients is that even though they are forced to leave, they still very much want to be with their partners. And so what we want to do is create a safe space so that they don't feel like we're being punitive about, if that's what they want to do, they know what's best for themselves. And so we want to create a space where we can provide healthy communication skills, not just for the survivor, but also their partner. For us, what's important is that their partner be willing to really learn and be invested in keeping their family together. And so we just provide the tools and provide the space for that to happen. But we don't have a program historically that services batters. I hate that term, but I don't know what other word to use. I guess now the new word is harm doers. And so, but a lot of times we know that those that cause harm have been survivors themselves of other types of complex trauma.
So the question was, can you repeat it again?
How often do you find that the perpetrator has also had symptoms of them being a victim themselves?
I think you mentioned it. Sometimes we call them suspects. They at one point maybe in their lives were victims as well. So that's all they know. That's the cycle they know. Our main role is just the initial radio call. If the batter hit somebody, we take them to jail. That's as far as we go. That's when we have the advocates provide the services to either them. I don't think they have any services for the suspects, just the victims themselves.
Yes, I believe that's correct. The term that we use in law enforcement is cycle of violence. So in the cycle of violence, more than likely, the person who's a suspect today was a victim yesterday, more than likely. The statistics are very skewed once again because it's hard to determine that because we don't have programs for suspects until they get into the prison system or the justice system. So to answer that question would be very difficult. But the cycle of violence is very strong, and if it's not broken in one way or another, they will commit that crime again.
Well, I refer to the cycle of violence as learned behavior. From personal point of view, my abuser was reared in a home full of dysfunction, violence, so that was learned behavior for him, and it trickled down to me. Even after I escaped him, I found myself taking on some of his traits. Verbally, I dated a guy after, not too long after he and I separated, and I dated a guy and I found myself being very verbally abusive to him. Even had to restrict myself from being violent toward him. That's totally out of my character. Once I realized that, I had to take a step back and say, okay, Kenesha, this is not who you are. I definitely didn't grow up in a home of dysfunction. My parents are still married to this day. They've been married about 48 years. So, I didn't experience that at all, but my abuser did. As far as the sexual assault component is concerned, as you were mentioning, guys or teenagers, preteens, find themselves losing their virginity at a very young age, so that did apply to him as well. And with that, I think men are taught, correct me if I'm wrong, men, but I think men are taught growing up, you go to the mall, how many numbers did you get today? It's like a divide and conquer type thing. So it plays into their adulthood and it turns into, something else. So it is a cycle of violence, learned behavior, and I think that from my point of view with Majestic Hearts, that is something that we need to consider starting a program for perpetrators, just to
end the cycle, or at least attempt to end the cycle.
And just to kind of add on to that, this knowledge about the cycle of violence is something that the context can help us understand this behavior, but it doesn't in any way excuse the behavior. So there's, I think, a big difference in saying, like, here's how we can disrupt it, here's how this, and that's not to say, well, they were abused growing up, so therefore that's all they know, and so there's no other alternative but for them to continue recreating it. Like, it doesn't excuse it, and learned behavior can be unlearned, absolutely.
So I really like the question that the audience member had about the training that the students here at the campus have to go through each semester. And I'm thinking about all these young people forming their lives and their attitudes and the cycle of violence. I've heard about the healing circle for the partners. I've heard about the harm doer, learned behaviors. What about the person who will become the harm doer, who is not yet the harm doer? What resources are available right now? What programs, what treatments, what modalities? If it doesn't exist, if you could wave a magic wand, what would it look like to try to reach those people and stop them before they become the harm doer?
That's a loaded question. How much time do we have? Well, I mean, one of the things is, we're doing a lot of prevention in high schools, junior highs, about like healthy relationships. I think is really important to be preventative. And again, as I mentioned about trauma-informed care, it's just across the board, educate everyone in better ways that we can communicate. When we see all these things happening in the world, and a lot of it is the lack of communication. We see a lot of bullying, and bullying may cause then, mass shootings and all these things that are connected to trauma and all the things that are happening in the world. So there's a lot of things that all of us can do as allies and do in a lot of in preventative ways. There isn't a magic wand and a magic program, because we don't really know what people are going to do until they do it, right? And or if they're willing to really acknowledge that there are problems in the way that they behave in relationships. And so really it's teaching them early, teaching people early, because the cycle of violence, statistically it takes about 8 generations to end the cycle, and that's not to be depressing or, but I think it's really important to recognize that people learn the behavior, and it's hard to really break the cycle, because a lot of times we can tell you, or people can say, this is what's unhealthy about this relationship, or this is what I don't want in a relationship, but most often than not, they cannot tell you what a healthy relationship does look like. And so we need to create more awareness, again, through music, through movies, because we're perpetuating these stereotypes, even in Disney movies, Beauty and the Beast. All these things that are really important, even to teach young kids. I have a daughter that's 4, and I talk to her in a way that's trauma informed. I ask her, I don't force her to wear something she doesn't want to wear. I don't force her to give her kisses. I mean, maybe a little bit. But if she says no, I want her to know that it means no, and that I respect her, and that she has a voice, and her voice is strong. And so it starts from really early, and so prevention needs to be a part of the curriculum in every setting, not just this one. I'm sorry. That's okay.
So I'd like to say thank you to our panelists. It's been very informative, very enjoyable. We have Wendy Blanco, we have Officer Munoz, Detective Sergeant Benny Williams, Kenesha Jackson of Majestic Hearts, and Megan Togley Adams. So, each of you can prepare to be change agents by arming yourselves with knowledge. I'd like to ask you to find your local resources and options, reach out, volunteer, get involved. If you've experienced trauma, ask for help. You deserve to tell your story. Prepare yourself so that you can be a friend who may open up to you about a traumatic experience such as sexual assault or domestic violence. We as humans are not meant to be less than. We are people, each of us, who have value and are loved. We must acknowledge ourselves and each other. So thank you so much, panelists. You're awesome.
Next on our agenda, we have scenario videos. Through the lens of critical race theory, we wanted to empower our victims. We wanted to empower victims by setting a platform for them to share their stories. This next part are incidents that were shared by our students, and we want to bring them to light.
It's about to start. Students shared their real-life experiences of sexual harassment and domestic violence. Through their stories, we recreated these incidents to empower everyone to speak up when we encounter these situations. In this scene, we have a professor, a person in power, making an appropriate comment during his lecture. In the real-life situation, no one confronted the professor, even though many students felt embarrassed and uncomfortable. Here, we show a student voice their concern and take the appropriate steps to address the issue.
Okay, so continuing our lecture with the feminist movement, today we're going to talk about women in Hollywood. We will start with Wonder Woman, the original Wonder Woman. Wow, would you look at the size of those? Anyways, so this was the first Wonder Woman, and
excuse me, Professor.
Yes?
I wanted to make a comment. That comment that you just made me feel really uncomfortable, and I felt it was inappropriate.
I mean, we are all adults here. Come on, we're all adults. Let's continue. So, like I was saying, this was the original Wonder Woman, and
if you are in this situation, please don't hesitate to talk to the dean, on-site officer, or a professor that you trust.
In this scene, we tried to recreate someone's experience in a nightclub. We have a female dancing with her friends, and a male, possibly intoxicated, comes from behind and starts grinding on her and pulling her away. Environments like nightclubs have made it a norm for any type of assaults without anyone saying anything. Here, we show how that person could have properly asked her to dance with permission. Keep in mind, everyone can be a victim of assault, not just women. Yeah. Last time I checked, it is never okay to touch someone without their permission. If you want to dance with someone, simply ask them. If they say no, move on. The world will continue, and so will you. Nightclubs should be about having fun and enjoying yourself, not feeling harassed or vigilant of the next attack. Now, check out how Romeo does it.
Hey, my name is Mario. You want to dance?
Sure, why not?
In this last scene, we have a boyfriend and a girlfriend fighting. When things get physical, the students around them take out their phones and start recording for Snapchat, Instagram, or other social media platforms. You can also hear people scream out, "World Star!" while they're recording. Some students laugh because he is a male getting pushed around by a female, and no one offers help. During this scene, we highlight the importance of not using your phone to record someone to make fun of them or for it to go viral, but instead, take your phone out and call the campus police before things escalate. Warning: the following footage contains inappropriate comments, profanity, physical violence, and screaming. Scenes related to intimate partner violence.
Hell no. So this is where you've been at? Why haven't you been answering your phone? I've been calling you. Yes, I've been calling you. No, I don't want to talk to you. Excuse me. Let me come over here. Yes, come over here. I don't care. What did I say? Get over here. I've been talking to you. Why haven't you been answering your phone? You're lucky I don't break this phone right now. I'm not. No, you're not going to leave, okay? Until I'm done talking to you. Okay, no. You didn't listen to what I want to say.
Hold up, guys. Instead of snapping, use your phone to call somebody. That ain't right. It doesn't matter if he's a guy or a girl. We're all victims. That's not right. See something, do something.
Continue with our Voice of Color tenant. We will now have spoken word artists come up and share their narratives. Before we do that, we have an audio poem written by our peer, Paola, who had the courage to share her story in order to bring her voice.
My voice of color. I named myself Survivor, and I am 29. I lived through domestic violence, a long part of my life. I'm going to tell my story about who I used to be, vulnerable as anyone can be. I was 17 the first day I met him by the library. It all started fine, it was all so sweet. Then I fell in love, deeply, and thought, hey, he will take good care of me. But little did I know that the sweet would turn sour, and that it would never be what I desired. He took my hand and he led the way. Destruction was the path he'd take. This man put me through so much pain, I can't even begin to explain. As a young Latina, all I knew were gender roles and traditions. Unfortunately for me, these made me submissive. But there was always a constant battle in my inner self, that this was not what I really wanted for myself. But still I hoped and prayed that everything will be okay. 7 years later, and everything's the same. I'm wondering if things will change because I'm suffering every day. He always screams, he always yells that I'm a bitch, that should burn in hell. I'm still getting kicked, I'm still getting slapped. I'm still a worthless piece of crap. But now, things are different. Having child services at my door, threatening to take what I most adore, living with constant bruising, always having to wear long sleeves, even when it was bright and sunny. Enough is enough. I finally got the strength to leave. Heartbroken because I broke up my family. Another single mother in need of assistance, I now became another statistic. Too embarrassed and too ashamed because quite often it was me who society would blame. They said a good woman stays with her man, and when I did, they said I liked to be treated bad. I was always oppressed, made sure to stay down, and then finally things changed around. Look at me now, here I am today, better than I was yesterday. They said you have to try harder, so that is what I did. And hey, look where I'm at, CSUDH. Speaking out today, making others aware that you're not the only one going through despair. But this poem is about survival, not about suffering. It's about empowering other women dealing with similar circumstances, reminding these that you are not alone. There are others out here, and there is still hope. Hang in there a little longer. Help is on its way, but don't be afraid. Speak up and speak out today.
If my skirt fit my curves just right, use your words, not your hands, to say, I look nice. And when you say it, make sure you're polite, not disrespectful. Because it's disrespectful to grab my hand or touch my body just because you like. Or let words come out your mouth like, yeah, I know, you think it's all right. Or did you think you just might get away with saying some things to me that you know is not right? That caused me to lose sleep at night? That caused me to question myself like, am I wrong? Am I right? I'm not having it today, not tomorrow, not ever. See, because I know what it's like to kiss lips full of apologies, get hit with fists that never formed a punching enemy. Just me. The one who loved them freely, I loved him completely, me. The person who gave him everything, but it still was never enough. He made me feel like I was nothing. Made me feel and believe that I was difficult to love. Yet I still forced myself to believe him every time he said he loved me. Every time he apologized, even though I knew it was all lies. Understand, I am strong in my silence, so do not mistake my kindness or weakness. See, one day a miracle was performed on me. That was the day I realized I had control of my destiny, and I chose to be free and love me completely and freely. See, it was some people praying for me, and I knew if I had the strength to stay, I had the will to leave. Now look at me. I hold my head high with pride, loving me freely and completely. And ain't a motherfucker alive who I ever let mistreat me. You're looking in the eyes of a survivor, a queen. And only time I bow my head is for them to crown me.
Hi everyone. I'm Jasmine. Never did I think you're talking about this. Never did I think I would go through what I went through with you. You know, you never really know someone. I knew you for years, then everything changed. You made me happy, but I still never knew who you were. You were so sweet, so nice, so quiet. That's how I got fooled. When it was good, it was amazing. I had the best sex of my life. When it was bad, we would fight. We would hurt each other. He held me hostage, took my keys, my money, my dignity. Everyone has issues, and maybe we could actually work through this. I believed in you when you let me down, made me feel like nothing, made me feel worthless. Weak bitch, you called me when I was most vulnerable. You wanted control of me. I never acted the way you wanted. You didn't like my family, my friends, my attitude. It was all me and my fault. You made me lose who I was, and I couldn't hide it anymore. You're an only child. Spoiled. Was that why you got so mad? Breaking shit, hurting me, hurting yourself? I believe we actually could make it work. I lied and protected you, and not once did I say anything. But my patience ran thin, and I could only cry so many more tears until all my tears for you were gone. You broke me down to nothing. I had nothing. I had no more room in my heart for that. I'm not your pet you can just lock away, and I'm especially not your bitch. I called your ex, and she didn't even have words. She didn't even have to tell me anything, I just knew. Her story was my story. At the end, you tried to tell the version of your story, manipulating your family like you manipulated me, because you didn't want them to know about your dirty laundry, the real Adam. But I don't give a fuck no more. I've been through too much to keep playing the victim, and I refuse to call myself a victim. Too many women go through the same thing. They're stuck, and their story is left untold. I never thought I would be in this predicament, never thought I'd tell my story. But it turns out your actions do have consequences, and that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Raquel.
Hi everyone, my name's Raquel. I just want to say thank you guys for having me here. I wrote my poem speaks to the dynamics of the domestic violence happening in the home as the child being the eyewitness of it. And then it talks about the sexual violence that takes place in the foster care system that we do not talk about. It's called I Didn't Ask to Be Here. It's a personal poem, personal story from me. And thank you for letting me share it here. So, I didn't ask to be here. Yeah, that's what I said. When I looked my mother in the face and she said she wished that I was dead. She said that she wished she had flushed me down the toilet instead. And after she gave me to the foster care agencies, to those men who tried to seduce and rape me, and a few things, unfortunate things that I'm afraid to mention. But listen, I'm gonna show y'all why being in these circumstances don't make you a victim. You ever grew up in a broken home where all your siblings had the same daddy except you, so you felt alone? Have you ever watched your stepdad beat on your mom and he beating on you and your siblings too, courtesy of alcohol? You ever had an ass whooping so bad that the school called the social workers and you told the truth and they take you and your siblings too? You ever heard about a child being locked in the system? Her mama only wants the siblings? No, your voice is gone and nobody refuses to listen. You see, I've been physically and mentally abused by strangers. The family that was supposed to protect me put me in the most danger. I woke up one night to a man standing over me asking me if I can do him a favor. I ran in fear in my life and there was no prosecution for the stranger. Nobody believed me. They thought I was crazy. They said if I happened to me, that I wanted it to happily. And sadly, I wish I could have stayed with my family, because the things that happened to me when I was in foster care, I wish that on nobody. It takes a lot of courage to stand in front of y'all and tell y'all my story. When I first wrote this, I was real angry and crying, because I was so angry. The first person that loved me, she failed to protect me. She didn't want to protect me. I had to live on the streets, still so I can eat, and somehow I still graduated 5 days from getting my master's degree, baby. People always talk about the road less traveled. Yeah, they fail to mention sometimes you don't get to choose your road. Sometimes you got to get it out of the mud, throw yourself from the flood. I didn't ask to be here, but I had different goals. I made something out of nothing, fought with my back against the ropes, my eyes closed. In life, you have to keep punching. When bad obstacles come your way, you can't duck them, confront them. I literally been fighting for all my life, and after 27 years, I'm still boxing. Because I'm trying to make something out of nothing. Because I ain't asked to be here. So when they ask me if I'm a victim, I say, hell no. Because being in these situations don't make you a victim and make you a survivor. And you are a survivor. Thank you.
Okay, so we're towards the end now, and can I please have our social justice class join us on stage, please, everyone? And also, before we end this event, we want to remind everyone that there is an event tomorrow hosted by the Women's Resource Center, and it's called Take Back the Night. And it's also important for you to attend this event as well. Would you like to inform everyone about maybe details about the event?
So Take Back the Night starts at 6:30 in the Sculpture Garden, which is the grassy area between LaCourte and the theater. We're starting off with a survivor speak out where any survivors of stalking, relationship violence, sexual assault are going to be welcome to the forum to share their stories. And there aren't a lot of other spaces that are safe and supportive where we can say that without shame. So we'll have the survivor speak out followed by a campus march and rally through the campus. And then we're going to end in Palm Courtyard with some art healing activities as well. So I hope to see you all there.
We want to thank everyone that came out to our event. We can no longer be silenced. It is important to use your voices to raise awareness. We will not be silence. My voice, his voice, her voice, their voice. Thank you.
That concludes our event. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.